Captain Marcus Chen stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the massive alien ship grow larger as they approached. The Valorian dreadnought was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around its edges, stretching nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that reminded Marcus of deep-sea creatures from Earth's oceans. "Captain, we're receiving their docking clearance," reported Lieutenant Sarah Mills from the communication station. Her voice carried a slight tremor that she was trying hard to hide. "They're directing us to Bay 7. Marcus nodded, keeping his expression calm despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. This was humanity's first official diplomatic contact with the Valorian Empire, a species that controlled nearly a quarter of this galactic sector. 3 months ago, their exploration vessel had stumbled into Valorian space, and instead of being destroyed, they had been escorted to a border station and held for questioning. The Valorians, it turned out, were curious about these small, fragile beings who had somehow developed faster than light travel, despite their obvious physical limitations. "Ambassador Rodriguez, are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, turning to the woman who would lead the negotiations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent her entire career studying xenobiology and interspecies communication, but even she looked nervous as she adjusted her formal diplomatic robes. "As ready as anyone can be for a completely unprecedented situation," she replied with a weak smile. "The preliminary communications suggest they're interested in establishing trade relations, but their social structure is still largely a mystery to us." What they did know was unsettling. The Valorians were a warrior culture, standing an average of 8 feet tall with dense bone structures and natural armor plating. Their society was built around concepts of strength and honor that human translators had struggled to interpret. Most concerning was their apparent belief that physical weakness equated to mental and spiritual inferiority. "Docking sequence initiated," announced the pilot. "Contact in 30 seconds. Marcus felt the slight vibration as the magnetic clamps engaged, followed by the hiss of pressure equalization. Through the ship's sensors, he could see Valorian figures moving in the docking bay, tall, imposing shapes that dwarfed the human delegation even at a distance. "Remember, everyone," Ambassador Rodriguez said to the small team that would accompany her, "we're not just representing ourselves here. We're representing all of humanity. Stay calm, stay respectful, and follow my lead." The airlock cycled open with a soft pneumatic sound, and Marcus got his first in-person look at their hosts. The Valorians were even more impressive up close. Their skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and their movements carried a fluid grace that seemed impossible for beings of their size. But it was their leader who immediately commanded attention. She stood nearly 8.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they could crush steel. Her natural armor plating was more pronounced than the others, with intricate patterns etched into the metallic surface. Her face was angular and sharp, with eyes that glowed with an inner light. When she spoke, her voice carried a harmonic undertone that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest. "I am Commander Zarathul of the Valorian Imperial Guard," she announced in heavily accented but understandable English. "You will follow me to the council chamber. Your Ambassador Rodriguez will speak for your species." As they walked through the corridors of the massive ship, Marcus noticed how the other Valorians reacted to the human delegation. Some stared with obvious curiosity, others with what appeared to be barely concealed disdain. He caught fragments of their conversations translated by his universal communicator, and most of it wasn't encouraging. "Look how small they are. How can such weak creatures have developed space travel? They move like frightened children." Commander Zarathul led them to a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the stars outside. Around a circular table sat a dozen Valorian officials, each more imposing than the last. The humans were given seats that had obviously been hastily modified to accommodate their smaller stature, making them feel even more like children among giants. "The Valorian High Council recognizes the presence of the human delegation," announced an elderly Valorian with scars covering half his face. "We have studied your species' capabilities and find them limited. However, your technological achievements suggest potential value in specific trade arrangements." Ambassador Rodriguez stood, her composure impressive despite being surrounded by beings who could literally crush her with their bare hands. "Honored members of the High Council, humanity is grateful for this opportunity to establish peaceful relations between our peoples. We believe that our species, while different in many ways, can benefit greatly from mutual cooperation and exchange of knowledge. Knowledge, scoffed another council member. What knowledge could a species of such obvious physical weakness possibly possess that would interest the Valorian Empire? Marcus watched as the ambassador maintained her diplomatic smile, but he could see the strain in her eyes. This wasn't going well. The Valorians seemed determined to view humanity through the lens of their warrior culture, where physical prowess was apparently the primary measure of worth. Perhaps, Commander Zarathul interjected, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the council, we should allow them to demonstrate their capabilities before dismissing them entirely. It would be unbecoming of Valorian honor to judge without proper evidence. The scarred council member leaned forward. Very well, Commander. What do you propose? A series of trials, she replied, her glowing eyes fixed on the human delegation. Let them prove their worth through action rather than words. If they fail, we send them back to their territory with a warning to avoid Valorian space. If they succeed, she paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Then perhaps these small beings have qualities that we have overlooked. Marcus felt his heart sink. Trials meant tests of strength, endurance, combat skills. All areas where humans would be hopelessly outmatched against Valorian physiology. He could see similar concern on the faces of his teammates, but Ambassador Rodriguez straightened her shoulders and nodded. Humanity accepts your challenge. We ask only that the trials be fair and that our success or failure be judged objectively. Acceptable, the scarred counselor replied. Commander Zarathul will oversee the trials. You have 3 standard days to prepare. Failure will result in immediate expulsion from Valorian space and a ban on future contact. As the formal session ended and the humans were escorted to guest quarters, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they had just agreed to something that could end very badly. For not just their small delegation, but for all of humanity's hopes for galactic expansion. The guest quarters aboard the Valorian ship were spacious but clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. Marcus sat on what appeared to be a meditation platform, reviewing the data his team had gathered about Valorian culture during their brief time aboard the ship. Ambassador Rodriguez was in the adjacent room, frantically preparing diplomatic strategies for various trial scenarios, while the rest of the delegation worked on technical assessments of Valorian technology. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Marcus opened the door to find Commander Zarathul standing in the corridor, her massive frame nearly filling the doorway. Up close, he could see the intricate details of her natural armor plating and the subtle patterns that seemed to shift color in the ship's lighting. Captain Chen, she said, her voice carrying that same harmonic undertone he had noticed earlier. I require a private discussion with you. Marcus gestured for her to enter, though he had to look up significantly to meet her glowing eyes. Of course, Commander. How can I help you? She moved into the room with surprising grace, her footsteps silent despite her size. You are military, yes? Not just a diplomat like the others. Former military, Marcus confirmed. I served in the Earth Defense Force before joining the diplomatic corps. Why do you ask? Zarathul studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that she was evaluating him in ways he couldn't begin to understand. The trials that the Council has ordered, she began slowly, they are not what your ambassador believes them to be. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Ambassador Rodriguez assumes these will be tests of knowledge, technical skill, perhaps cultural understanding. But the Council members who opposed this meeting, they have designed these trials to ensure human failure. They will test physical strength, combat prowess, endurance challenges that would be difficult even for young Valorian warriors. Then we're doomed, Marcus said quietly. No human could compete with Valorians in physical trials. Perhaps, Zarathul replied, moving to the viewport that looked out into space. But you misunderstand the true nature of these tests. They are not merely about physical capability. In Valorian culture, trials are about proving one's worthiness through courage, determination, and honor. A warrior who faces impossible odds with bravery earns more respect than one who wins through superior strength alone. Marcus began to see where this was leading. You're saying that how we face these trials matters more than whether we win them? I am saying that the right kind of failure can be more impressive than the wrong kind of victory. She turned back to face him, and Marcus was surprised to see something that might have been respect in her expression. But there is something else. The final trial. It is personal. Personal how? Zarathul was quiet for several minutes, and Marcus could see her struggling with some internal conflict. Finally she spoke. In Valorian society, a warrior's strength is proven not just through combat, but through their willingness to form bonds with other strong individuals. The final trial requires the human delegation to choose one member who will pair with a Valorian warrior for a ceremonial union that demonstrates mutual respect and equality. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. You mean marriage? Not permanent marriage as you might understand it, but a formal bonding ceremony that creates diplomatic ties between our species. It requires both parties to demonstrate complete trust in each other, to show that they view the other as an equal despite obvious physical differences. And if no one is willing to undergo this ceremony, then humanity will be deemed too weak and fearful to be worthy partners of the Valorian Empire. Your species will be banned from this entire sector of space. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this information. Who would the human representative be expected to bond with? Zarathul's armor plates shifted color slightly, taking on a deeper metallic hue that Marcus was beginning to recognize as a sign of emotional intensity. Me, she said simply. As the overseer of the trials, I am the designated Valorian partner. The council believes that no human would dare to bond with someone of my rank and physical presence. Marcus looked at her again, really looked at her this time. She was indeed intimidating, easily twice his weight with natural weapons that could kill him without effort. But there was something else he noticed now, a careful intelligence in her eyes and a restraint in her movements that spoke of someone who was very aware of her own power and chose to control it carefully. Why are you telling me this? He asked. You could have let us go into the trials blind. Because I believe your species may have qualities that the Council fails to recognize. In our brief interactions, I have observed that humans possess a form of courage that is different from ours. You face impossible odds not with rage or bloodlust, but with determination and cleverness. These are traits that the Valorian Empire could benefit from. Marcus stood and began pacing the small room, his mind racing through the implications. The other trials, the physical ones, those are designed to set us up for failure so that when we refuse the bonding ceremony, it will seem like just another example of human weakness. Precisely. But if a human were to volunteer for the ceremony, especially after demonstrating courage in the previous trials, she let the sentence hang in the air. It would force the council to acknowledge human bravery, Marcus finished. Even if we failed the physical tests, completing the bonding ceremony would prove that humans don't back down from challenges, no matter how impossible they seem. There are risks, Zarathul warned. The ceremony itself is intense. It requires both parties to share thoughts, memories, emotions through a neural link. You would experience what it is like to possess Valorian strength, and I would experience human fragility. Many Valorians find the process disturbing when performed with other species. Marcus stopped pacing and faced her directly. And you? How do you feel about the possibility of bonding with a human? Her armor plates shifted color again, and Marcus thought he detected something that might have been vulnerability in her expression. I am curious. In my position, I rarely encounter beings who are not either subordinates or rivals. The idea of connecting with someone who offers a completely different perspective is intriguing. A soft alert chimed from Marcus's communication device. Captain, came Lieutenant Mills's voice. Ambassador Rodriguez requests your presence in the main meeting room. The Valorians have sent us the details of the trial schedule. Marcus looked at Zarathul. I should go. Yes, she agreed, moving toward the door. But Captain Chen, consider what we have discussed. Your delegation will need to make this choice soon, and it should be made by someone who truly understands what they are volunteering for. After she left, Marcus sat down heavily on the meditation platform. Through the viewport, he could see stars wheeling slowly past as the massive ship continued its journey. Somewhere out there was Earth, and billions of humans who were counting on this mission to open up new frontiers for their species. The choice was becoming clear, even though it terrified him. If someone from their delegation was going to undergo this bonding ceremony, it should be someone with military training, someone who understood the concept of acceptable risk in service of a larger mission. Ambassador Rodriguez was too valuable to risk. and the other team members were specialists whose loss would cripple future diplomatic efforts. That left him. Marcus took a deep breath and headed for the meeting room, knowing that he was about to volunteer for something that would either save humanity's future in space or destroy his own life in the attempt. But as he walked through the corridors of the alien ship, surrounded by beings who could kill him without effort, he realized that for the first time since leaving Earth, he wasn't afraid. He was determined. The trial arena was a vast chamber deep within the Valorian ship, its walls lined with energy shields that contained whatever activities took place within. Hundreds of Valorian spectators filled the elevated viewing areas, their armor plates gleaming under the artificial lighting. Marcus could feel their eyes on the human delegation as they entered the arena floor, and the murmur of their conversations carried an undertone of anticipation that wasn't entirely friendly. "The first trial is endurance," announced the scarred counselor who had presided over their initial meeting. His voice echoed throughout the chamber through some form of amplification system. "Participants must traverse the maze of determination while carrying a ceremonial burden. Failure to complete the course within the allotted time will result in immediate disqualification." Marcus studied the maze that materialized in the center of the arena. Constructed from solid metal walls that rose 20 feet high, it stretched across an area the size of several city blocks. Energy fields crackled between the walls, and he could see mechanical obstacles moving within the maze's pathways. "The ceremonial burden weighs approximately 200 pounds in your measurement system," the counselor continued. "Each participant must carry it throughout the entire course without assistance." Marcus exchanged glances with Ambassador Rodriguez. 200 pounds was manageable for a human in good physical condition, but carrying that weight through a complex obstacle course would be exhausting even under ideal circumstances. For Valorians with their enhanced musculature, it would be little more than a warm-up exercise. "I'll take the first trial," Marcus volunteered, stepping forward before anyone else could object. He had already made his decision about the bonding ceremony, but he wasn't ready to reveal that yet. For now, he needed to show the Valorians that humans could face impossible odds with dignity. "Commander," Zarathul approached with the ceremonial burden, a crystalline sculpture that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its transparent structure. Despite its beauty, the weight was immediately apparent as Marcus accepted it. 200 pounds of carefully balanced mass that would grow heavier with every step. "The time limit is 1 standard hour," Zarathul announced formally, though Marcus caught a subtle nod that might have been encouragement. "Begin when ready." Marcus took a deep breath and entered the maze. The first pathway was straightforward, but he could already feel the weight of the burden pulling at his shoulders and back. Valorian spectators watched from above as he navigated the initial turns, their comments filtering down through his universal translator. "Look how he struggles with such a simple load. A Valorian child could complete this trial in half the time. This is waste of our time. They should concede now and save themselves the embarrassment." Marcus ignored the commentary and focused on the maze ahead. The first real obstacle appeared around a sharp corner, a series of platforms that required him to climb while maintaining his grip on the ceremonial burden. For a Valorian, this would be a simple matter of jumping from platform to platform, but Marcus had to approach it differently. He studied the configuration for several minutes, noting the spacing between platforms and the angle of approach required. Then, instead of attempting the direct route, he began working his way up using a technique he had learned during his military training, distributing the weight across his body and using leverage points to maintain balance while climbing. It took him 3 times as long as it would have taken a Valorian, but he completed the obstacle without dropping the burden. The spectator comments began to shift slightly. "Interesting technique. He approaches the challenge differently than we would. Still too slow, but methodical." The maze continued to present challenges clearly designed for Valorian physiology. Gaps that required enormous leaps, walls that needed to be scaled with pure upper body strength. Corridors filled with obstacles that assumed a warrior's natural armor and enhanced reflexes. But Marcus had learned long ago that humans survive not through superior strength, but through adaptability and problem-solving. At one point, he encountered a corridor filled with energy discharges that would arc between the walls at regular intervals. A Valorian could simply run through, trusting their natural armor to protect them from the electrical discharges. Marcus didn't have that option. Instead, he observed the pattern of the energy arcs for several minutes, timing their intervals and noting the brief gaps when the corridor was safe to traverse. Then, calculating his movement precisely, he sprinted through during a lull in the discharge pattern, rolling and dodging to avoid the residual energy fields. Clever, he heard someone comment from above. He uses his mind to compensate for physical limitations. By the halfway point of the maze, Marcus was exhausted. Sweat poured down his face and his muscles ached from the constant strain of carrying the burden while navigating obstacles designed for beings twice his size. But he noticed something else. The spectator comments had changed from mocking dismissal to genuine interest. He has not given up. Despite obvious disadvantage, the burden grows heavier, yet he continues. There is determination in this small creature. The final section of the maze presented its greatest challenge, a narrow bridge that spanned a deep chasm, with wind generators creating powerful air currents designed to knock a warrior off balance. The bridge was wide enough for a Valorian to cross comfortably, but for Marcus, carrying his burden in the artificial windstorm, it would require perfect balance and unshakable focus. Marcus stood at the edge of the bridge for several minutes, studying the wind patterns and calculating his approach. The spectators had fallen silent, watching to see if the small human would finally admit defeat. Even Ambassador Rodriguez looked concerned, clearly wondering if this trial was worth the risk. But Marcus had made his choice long before entering the maze. This wasn't just about completing a trial. It was about proving that humans belonged among the stars, that they could face impossible challenges and find a way through them. He stepped onto the bridge. The wind hit him immediately, nearly knocking him sideways. The ceremonial burden, which had felt heavy throughout the maze, now seemed determined to pull him over the edge. But Marcus had learned something during his journey through the maze. The burden wasn't just a weight to be carried. Its crystalline structure contained swirling patterns that seemed to respond to movement and stress, creating a subtle gyroscopic effect when properly balanced. Instead of fighting against the wind, Marcus began to use the burden's properties to help maintain his equilibrium. He moved slowly, carefully adjusting his grip and posture to work with the crystalline sculpture's natural balance rather than against it. Step by step, he made his way across the bridge while hurricane-force winds tried to sweep him into the chasm below. When he finally reached the other side, the arena had fallen completely silent. Marcus set down the ceremonial burden and looked up at the spectators, many of whom were staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite interpret. He had taken 53 minutes to complete a course designed to be finished in 30, but he had finished it. Commander Zarathul approached, her armor plates shifting to colors Marcus was beginning to associate with approval. "The trial is complete," she announced formally. "The human demonstrates unexpected capability." The scarred counselor leaned forward in his viewing box, his expression unreadable. "The participant succeeded through unconventional methods," he admitted grudgingly. However, this was merely the first trial. 2 more challenges await, each more demanding than the last. As Marcus was escorted back to the human delegation, he caught sight of several Valorian warriors in the spectator area engaging in intense discussions. Their body language suggested debate, possibly even disagreement about what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Rodriguez met him with a mixture of pride and concern. "That was incredible, Marcus, but are you sure you can handle 2 more trials like that?" Marcus accepted a hydration pack from Lieutenant Mills and considered the question. His body ached, and he knew the next trials would be even more challenging. But something had changed during his journey through the maze. He had felt the crystalline burden responding to his movements, had sensed a connection to the Valorian technology that went beyond simple physical interaction. More importantly, he had seen the way the spectators reacted as he refused to give up despite impossible odds. The mockery had gradually transformed into something that might have been respect, and he had noticed several Valorians discussing his performance with what appeared to be genuine interest. "I can handle it," he told Rodriguez. "But more than that, I think I'm beginning to understand what the Valorians really value. It's not just about strength or speed. It's about refusing to surrender when everything seems hopeless." As they prepared to leave the arena, Marcus caught Commander Zarathul watching him with an expression that seemed almost curious. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him the slightest of nods before turning away. The first trial was complete, But Marcus knew the real test was just beginning. The second trial took place in a different section of the ship, a combat training facility that made the previous arena look simple by comparison. The walls were covered with weapon racks displaying Valorian armaments, each one designed for beings with strength far beyond human capability. Energy fields crackled around practice dummies that looked like they could withstand artillery strikes. Marcus stood in the center of the combat ring, feeling smaller than ever as Valorian spectators filled the viewing galleries. Word of his performance in the maze had apparently spread, because the crowd was significantly larger this time. Their armor plates gleamed in colors he was beginning to recognize as anticipation and curiosity. "The second trial is combat prowess," announced the scarred counselor. "The participant will face a series of opponents designed to test warrior instincts, tactical thinking, and ability to adapt under pressure. Failure to complete 3 consecutive victories will result in disqualification." Marcus swallowed hard as he studied the opponents being prepared. They weren't Valorians, thankfully, but robotic constructs built to simulate various enemy types that Valorian warriors might face in battle. Even the smallest of them stood 8 feet tall and moved with fluid precision that suggested advanced artificial intelligence. "You may choose your weapons from the available selection," Commander Zarathul announced, gesturing toward the weapon racks. "However, all weapons must be used as designed. No modifications or unconventional applications will be permitted." Marcus approached the weapon displays, knowing that this restriction was deliberately designed to prevent him from finding creative solutions, as he had in the maze. Every weapon was sized for Valorian hands and strength levels. The smallest sword was nearly 4 feet long and weighed at least 20 pounds. The energy weapons required grip strength that would challenge even a trained human athlete. But as he studied the weapons, Marcus began to notice something interesting. While they were all designed for Valorian physiology, they weren't all designed for the same combat style. Some weapons emphasized brute force, others precision, and a few seemed built for speed and agility rather than raw power. He selected a curved blade that resembled a saber, its weight manageable despite being clearly designed for larger hands. The grip was too wide for him to hold properly, but the weapon's balance was excellent, and its energy field could be activated with a simple thumb switch. "Interesting choice," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to find a Valorian warrior approaching, her armor plates colored in patterns he didn't recognize. That blade belonged to Commander Kethvar, one of our greatest duelists. She was smaller than most Valorians and relied on speed rather than strength. "Was?" Marcus asked. "She died honorably in battle against the Xerian fleet," the warrior replied. "Her blade has not been claimed by another, as few possess her particular combination of skills. Perhaps it will serve you better than the heavy weapons designed for brute force." Marcus nodded his thanks and stepped into the combat ring. His first opponent was activated, a humanoid construct that moved with mechanical precision but lacked the fluid grace of living beings. It wielded a massive warhammer that could probably pulverize concrete, and its optical sensors locked onto Marcus with calculating intensity. The construct attacked immediately, swinging its hammer in a wide arc that would have crushed a human instantly, but Marcus had expected this. During his military training, he had learned to fight opponents who were larger, stronger, and better armed. The key was never to meet their strength directly, but to use their power against them. Marcus rolled under the hammer swing, came up behind the construct and struck at what appeared to be a joint in its leg assembly. The energy blade cut through the mechanical components and the construct stumbled but didn't fall. It spun faster than Marcus had anticipated, backhand sweeping with enough force to knock him across the ring. Marcus hit the energy barrier that surrounded the combat area and slid to the ground, his vision blurring from the impact. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the spectator comments. "The small one lacks the mass to deliver decisive strikes. His weapon technique is adequate, but insufficient against armored opponents. He should concede before he is seriously injured." But Marcus had noticed something during his brief exchange with the construct. Its movements were precise but predictable, following combat algorithms that assumed opponents would meet force with force. When he had struck at the joint, the construct had been momentarily confused by an attack that targeted mechanical vulnerability rather than attempting to overpower its defenses. Marcus struggled to his feet and raised Kethvar's blade again. This time, instead of trying to disable the construct, he focused on learning its patterns. He dodged and weaved, taking minor hits but studying, how the machine responded to different types of attacks and movements. The spectators began to murmur as Marcus spent several minutes apparently avoiding combat rather than engaging directly. But Commander Zarathul, watching from the elevated platform, seemed to understand what he was doing. "He learns," she said quietly to the counselor beside her, like Kethvar did. She would study an opponent's patterns before committing to an attack strategy. After mapping the construct's behavioral algorithms, Marcus finally moved to the offensive. Instead of targeting the obvious weak points, he began using the construct's own strength against it. When it swung its hammer, he would deflect the blow slightly, causing the weapon to strike the construct's own armor. When it lunged forward, he would sidestep and guide its momentum into the energy barriers surrounding the ring. Gradually, the construct began to show damage from its own attacks. Its movements became less precise as internal systems were jarred by impacts it hadn't been programmed to handle. Finally, Marcus managed to maneuver it into striking its own power core with its hammer, and the construct shut down permanently. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting in surprised chatter. Marcus had won, but not through superior strength or speed. He had analyzed his opponent and found a way to make it defeat itself. The second opponent was more challenging, a construct designed to simulate Valorian combat styles, with multiple weapons and advanced tactical programming. But Marcus applied the same principles, studying its patterns and finding ways to use its own capabilities against it. The fight took longer and he sustained several painful impacts, but eventually managed to cause the construct to overload its own energy systems. By the time the third opponent appeared, Marcus was bleeding from multiple cuts and his left arm hung uselessly at his side from an impact that had probably cracked his shoulder blade. The final construct was the largest yet, a massive mechanical warrior that seemed designed to test the limits of even Valorian endurance. Marcus looked up at the spectators and noticed that the comments had changed again. Instead of dismissal or mockery, he heard something that sounded almost like concern. "The small one is badly injured. He has proven his point. Why does he continue? Honor demands that he be allowed to concede with dignity." But Marcus wasn't thinking about conceding. He was thinking about the billions of humans back on Earth and the vast galaxy that lay beyond Valorian space. He was thinking about Commander Zarathul and her willingness to help him understand what these trials really meant. Most of all, he was thinking about the bonding ceremony that would follow, and his growing certainty that he would be the one to volunteer for it. The third construct moved differently than the others. Its programming seemed more sophisticated, and it adapted to Marcus's tactics more quickly than its predecessors. When he tried to use its strength against it, the construct adjusted its movements to prevent him from redirecting its attacks. When he targeted its joints and weak points, it modified its stance to protect vulnerable areas. Marcus realized that this construct was learning from him just as he had learned from it. The fight became a deadly game of adaptation and counter-adaptation, with both combatants constantly evolving their strategies. But Marcus had one advantage that the construct lacked: desperation born of necessity. Using Kethvar's blade in a way that would have horrified traditional weapons masters, Marcus began fighting in a style that was purely human. He used his smaller size to slip through gaps in the construct's defenses, struck at targets that seemed meaningless until they combined to create systemic failures, and refused to fight according to any recognized combat doctrine. When the construct finally fell, its systems overwhelmed by a cascade of minor damages that had accumulated into total failure, Marcus collapsed beside it. But he had won all three fights and, in doing so, had demonstrated something that even he hadn't fully understood when he began. Humans didn't win through superior strength or speed. They won through sheer stubborn refusal to give up, and through their ability to find solutions that no one else would have considered. Commander Zarathul approached him as medical technicians checked his injuries. "That was unprecedented," she said quietly. "No one has ever defeated our training constructs using such methods." Marcus managed a weak smile. "We humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you can't win through strength, you find another way." "Yes," she replied, her armor plates shifting to deep blue patterns that Marcus was beginning to associate with respect. "I am beginning to understand that about your species. The final trial awaits, but perhaps the Council has already seen enough to make their decision." As Marcus was helped from the combat ring, he caught sight of the scarred counselor deep in discussion with several other Valorian officials. Their body language suggested intense debate, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder if his unconventional victories had created complications that no one had anticipated. The third trial would determine not just the success of the diplomatic mission, but the future relationship between humans and Valorians. And the medical bay aboard the Valorian ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Instead of traditional equipment, the walls pulsed with bioluminescent organisms that seemed to sense his injuries and respond accordingly. Tendrils of light played across his damaged shoulder, and he could actually feel the bone beginning to mend under their influence. "Remarkable," said Dr. Rodriguez, who had insisted on observing the treatment process. "Their medical technology appears to be partially organic, working with the body's natural healing processes rather than simply treating symptoms." The Valorian medical technician, a surprisingly gentle giant named Healer Vorthek, nodded approvingly. "Your species' cellular structure is more adaptable than we anticipated. The bio-neural interfaces are establishing connections more easily than our initial projections suggested." Marcus winced as feeling returned to his previously numb arm. "Bio-neural interfaces? All Valorian medical technology operates through direct neural connection," Vorthak explained. "It allows us to heal not just physical injuries but mental trauma and emotional imbalances. Your brain's neural pathways are fascinating, much more complex than your physical size would suggest." Dr. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Marcus. "Healer Vorthak, would this neural compatibility have any implications for other types of bio-neural connections?" The massive alien's armor plates shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated surprise. "You refer to bonding ceremonies? That would depend on the individual's neural adaptability and emotional resonance capabilities." "Why do you ask?" Before Dr. Rodriguez could answer, Commander Zarathul entered the medical bay. Her presence seemed to fill the space, and Marcus noticed that even Healer Vorthak straightened respectfully at her approach. "Captain Chen," she said formally, "the Council requires your presence for the briefing regarding the final trial. Your injuries are sufficiently healed for participation." Marcus stood carefully, testing his restored mobility. The Valorian medical technology was indeed remarkable. What should have been weeks of recovery had been accomplished in hours. "I'm ready, Commander." As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the council chamber, Zarathul spoke quietly. "The previous trials have caused considerable discussion among the council members. Your unconventional approaches have challenged their assumptions about human capabilities. Is that good or bad for our diplomatic mission?" "Uncertain," she replied. "Some council members are impressed by your adaptability and determination. Others view your methods as proof that humans cannot be trusted to follow established protocols and traditions." They entered a smaller chamber adjacent to the main council room, where Ambassador Rodriguez and the rest of the human delegation were waiting with several Valorian officials. The atmosphere was tense, with none of the formal ceremony that had marked their previous meetings. The scarred counselor stood at the center of the room, his expression unreadable. "Captain Chen, your performance in the previous trials has been unexpected. The Council has debated extensively regarding the implications of your victories." Marcus remained silent, sensing that more information was coming. "The final trial," the counselor continued, "was designed to test the ultimate expression of warrior courage, the willingness to bond with a Valorian in a ceremony that creates permanent diplomatic ties between our species. This bonding requires complete trust, emotional vulnerability, and acceptance of shared consciousness through bio-neural connection." Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward. "Honored Counselor, perhaps we should discuss the specific requirements and implications of this ceremony before—" "The requirements are simple," the counselor interrupted. "One member of your delegation must volunteer to undergo the bonding ceremony with Commander Zarathul. The ceremony will create a permanent neural link between the participants, allowing them to share thoughts, emotions, and memories. This bond cannot be severed and will last for the remainder of both participants' lives." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but also experienced an odd sense of calm. This was the moment he had been preparing for since his conversation with Zarathul after the first trial. Furthermore, the counselor added, the volunteer must make their decision now, before learning the specific details of the ceremony. This demonstrates the kind of absolute trust that Valorian bonding requires. Dr. Rodriguez looked stricken. You're asking someone to commit to a permanent, life-altering procedure without full informed consent. That goes against every principle of ethical medical practice. It goes against human principles, corrected another Valorian official. Valorian bonding has always required absolute faith in one's partner. To demand detailed explanations would be an insult to Commander Zarathul's honor and capability. Marcus looked around the room at his fellow humans. Lieutenant Mills appeared terrified by the prospect. Dr. Rodriguez was clearly struggling with the ethical implications. Ambassador Rodriguez looked like she was trying to find a diplomatic way to refuse the trial altogether. But Marcus's attention was drawn to Commander Zarathul, who stood silently at the edge of the group. Her armor plates were shifting through colors he had never seen before, deep purples and blues that seemed to indicate profound emotional turmoil. She was looking directly at him, and in her glowing eyes he saw something that might have been hope mixed with fear. "I volunteer," Marcus said quietly. The room erupted in shocked exclamations from both species. Ambassador Rodriguez immediately began protesting, while several Valorian officials seemed stunned that a human had actually agreed to the ceremony. "Marcus, you can't," Dr. Rodriguez pleaded. "We don't know what this procedure will do to your nervous system, your brain chemistry, your fundamental sense of self." "I know," Marcus replied calmly. "But I also know that this is why we're here, not just to establish trade agreements or exchange technical knowledge, but to prove that humans and Valorians can trust each other completely. If I'm not willing to take that risk, then we're telling them that we view them as too dangerous to form genuine bonds with." Commander Zarathul stepped forward, her massive frame moving with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Captain Chen, you should understand that this bonding is not merely diplomatic ceremony. The neural connection will allow me to experience your memories, your emotions, your deepest thoughts, and you will experience mine. For a Valorian, this level of intimacy is typically reserved for life partners." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I understand, Commander. The question is whether you're willing to undergo this bonding with a human. I imagine the prospect of experiencing human fragility and emotional intensity might be as unsettling for you as experiencing Valorian strength is for me." Her armor plates shifted to deep gold, a color Marcus had never seen before. "I am prepared to accept that risk. The question remains whether you truly comprehend what you are volunteering for." The scarred counselor interrupted their exchange. "The volunteer has been accepted. The ceremony will take place in 1 standard hour in the Chamber of Binding. Commander Zarathul will prepare the human for the process." As the council members began to disperse, Ambassador Rodriguez grabbed Marcus's arm. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Once this ceremony takes place, there's no going back. You'll be linked to her for life." Marcus looked across the room at Commander Zarathul, who was speaking quietly with her fellow Valorians. Despite her imposing size and obvious physical power, he had seen glimpses of something else during their interactions: curiosity, intelligence, and perhaps even loneliness. Someone who had spent her life being feared and respected but rarely truly understood. "I'm certain," he told Rodriguez, "this isn't just about diplomatic success anymore. I think Zarathul and I have the potential to build something genuinely meaningful between our species. But it requires someone to take the first step, to show that humans are capable of the kind of courage that Valorians respect." Dr. Rodriguez shook her head in frustration. "And if the ceremony goes wrong? If the neural incompatibility causes permanent damage to your brain?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Then at least we'll have proven that humans are willing to risk everything for the chance at mutual understanding." Sometimes that's the most important message of all. As he prepared to leave for the Chamber of Binding, Marcus caught Commander Zarathul watching him with an expression that seemed equal parts admiration and terror. In 1 hour, they would be bound together in ways that neither of their species had ever experienced before. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, Forcus was becoming increasingly certain that it would require him to. The Chamber of Binding was unlike anywhere else Marcus had seen on the Valorian ship. The walls were composed of living crystal that pulsed with soft rhythmic light, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. Bioneural conduits snaked across the ceiling like luminescent vines, converging on a raised platform in the center of the room where 2 ceremonial alcoves awaited. Marcus stood at the threshold, wearing the simple ceremonial robes that had been provided, garments that somehow adjusted to fit his human proportions, despite being designed for Valorian ceremonies. Commander Zarathul stood beside him, similarly robed, though her massive frame made the formal wear look almost comically small. The HFY bonding ceremony has not been performed between different species in over 3,000 years, explained High Ritualist Keftar, an ancient Valorian whose armor plates had faded to silver with age. The last attempt was with the Zarians, and it ended in madness for both participants. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he nodded firmly. I understand the risks. Keftar's glowing eyes studied him intently. Do you? When the neural link is established, you will not merely exchange thoughts. You will become temporarily a single consciousness experiencing reality from two vastly different perspectives. Many Valorians find the process overwhelming even with members of their own species. The differences between your minds may be insurmountable. Then we'll find out together, Marcus replied, glancing at Zarathul. Her armor plates were cycling through rapid color changes that indicated extreme nervousness. The ceremony chamber filled with Valorian observers, including the full council and dozens of warriors, who had apparently requested permission to witness this unprecedented event. Marcus noticed that even the ones who had initially opposed the diplomatic mission seemed genuinely curious about the outcome. Ambassador Rodriguez and the rest of the human delegation were given places of honor near the platform, though Marcus could see the worry etched on their faces. Dr. Rodriguez had equipped herself with every medical monitoring device she could find, clearly prepared to intervene if something went wrong. The bonding requires both participants to enter the alcoves simultaneously, High Ritualist Keftar explained. Bio-neural conduits will establish connections with your nervous systems, gradually increasing the level of shared consciousness until complete union is achieved. The process cannot be reversed once begun. Marcus climbed the steps to the platform, his legs feeling unsteady. The alcove was designed for Valorian physiology, but the living crystal seemed to sense his presence and began reshaping itself to accommodate his smaller frame. When he lay down, tendrils of warm crystal embraced his body, and he felt tiny sensations as bio-neural connections began to establish themselves. Commander Zarathul settled into her alcove, her massive form dwarfing the ceremonial platform. For the first time since he had met her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. Captain Chen, she said quietly, if this process causes you harm, I will bear the responsibility. Valorian honor demands no less. And if it harms you, Marcus replied, I'll carry that burden. That's what partnership means. The High Ritualist began chanting in an ancient Valorian dialect, and the bio-neural conduits began to glow more brightly. Marcus felt a tingling sensation spreading through his nervous system, starting at the points where the crystal tendrils touched his skin and radiating outward. The first connection was subtle, a faint sense of another presence at the edge of his consciousness. But as the bio-neural link strengthened, that presence became more distinct. He could sense Zarathul's thoughts, her emotions, her memories beginning to overlap with his own. The initial contact was overwhelming. Zarathul's mind was vast, filled with centuries of experience and structured according to principles completely alien to human cognition. But gradually Marcus began to find patterns he could understand. Her thoughts were organized around concepts of honor, duty, and strength. But underneath those surface motivations he sensed something else, profound loneliness and a desperate desire for genuine connection. Through the neural link, he experienced Zarathul's memories of rising through the Valorian military hierarchy, earning respect through combat prowess but never finding anyone who saw her as more than a weapon to be deployed. He felt her confusion when she first encountered humans, being so physically fragile that they should have been beneath notice, yet who displayed forms of courage that challenged everything she thought she knew about strength. But the link worked both ways. Zarathul was experiencing his memories, his emotions, his fundamentally human perspective on existence. Through her alien consciousness, Marcus felt her shock at the intensity of human emotions, the speed at which humans formed attachments, and the way they could find joy and wonder in things that Valorians took for granted. Your thoughts move so quickly. Her mental voice reached him, colored with amazement. How do you process so many emotions simultaneously without being overwhelmed? Practice, Marcus replied through the link. surprising himself with how natural mental communication felt. Humans learn to live with emotional complexity from childhood. How do you maintain such perfect control over your reactions? Discipline, training, the belief that emotional control equals strength. He sensed her mental equivalent of a laugh. But experiencing your memories, I begin to understand that emotional expression might be a different form of strength. As the bonding deepened, Marcus found himself experiencing Zarathul's physical strength and sensory capabilities. Through her nervous system, he felt what it was like to possess the power to crush steel with bare hands, to see across multiple electromagnetic spectra, to move with grace despite massive size. The sensation was intoxicating. For the first time in his life, he felt truly powerful. But Zarathul was having the opposite experience. Through Marcus's nervous system, she experienced human fragility in ways she had never imagined. Every sensation was amplified. Every movement carried the awareness of vulnerability. Yet instead of weakness, she found something unexpected. You live every moment knowing how easily you could be destroyed. Her thoughts reached him, tinged with wonder. Yet you face impossible odds without hesitation. This is not foolishness. This is courage I never understood. And you carry the burden of incredible power while maintaining enough control never to harm those weaker than yourself. Marcus replied. That requires a form of strength I never appreciated. The neural bond continued to strengthen, and Marcus began to understand why the ceremony was considered so intimate among Valorians. They weren't just sharing thoughts, they were sharing fundamental aspects of their identity. He experienced Zarathul's deep sense of responsibility for her people, her fear that her strength made her unable to form genuine connections, her growing fascination with human adaptability and determination. In return, she experienced his memories of Earth, his love for his family, his dreams of exploring the galaxy, and his growing certainty that the bonding ceremony represented more than just diplomatic necessity. Despite the vast differences between their species, he had found in her someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the loneliness of command. The connection is stabilizing, Ritualist Keftar announced, though his voice seemed to come from very far away. The bonding approaches completion. As the final neural pathways locked into place, Marcus experienced a moment of perfect unity with Zarathul. For an instant, they were truly one consciousness experiencing reality from two perspectives simultaneously. Human vulnerability and Valorian strength, emotional intensity and disciplined control, curiosity and honor, all existing in perfect balance. When the bonding was complete and they slowly returned to individual consciousness, Marcus found that he retained an awareness of Zarathul's presence at the edge of his mind. Not intrusive, but comforting, a reminder that he was no longer alone in facing the challenges ahead. Zarathul sat up in her alcove, her armor plate cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before, brilliant golds and silvers that seemed to indicate profound joy. When she looked at him, her glowing eyes held a warmth that transformed her entire appearance. The bonding is successful. Her mental voice reached him effortlessly. And Captain Chen, Marcus, I believe we have accomplished something far more significant than either of our peoples anticipated. The chamber erupted in astonished discussions, as Valorian observers realized that not only had the bonding succeeded, but both participants appeared to have been enhanced rather than damaged by the experience. Marcus stood on unsteady legs, marveling at how different his own body felt now that he retained a connection to Valorian strength. Ambassador Rodriguez rushed to the platform, her medical scanners confirming that both Marcus and Zarathul were not only unharmed, but showed enhanced neural activity and improved physical capabilities. Remarkable, she breathed. The bioneural link appears to have created a symbiotic enhancement effect. You're both stronger than you were before the bonding. Marcus smiled, looking at Zarathul and feeling her presence in his mind like a warm current. I think that's the point, Ambassador. When different species trust each other completely, they don't lose their individual strengths, they gain new ones. The scarred counselor approached the platform, his expression. Adventures were still ahead of them. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and challenges beyond imagination, but they would face it together, proving again and again that the bonds formed through courage and trust were stronger than any force in the universe. The only man who had the courage to mate with the 8-foot alien woman had become something far greater than he had ever imagined. Not just a bridge between species, but a herald of a new age where differences were celebrated as strengths, and the vast distances between worlds could be conquered by beings willing to reach across the void with open hearts and minds. Form? His expression showing the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. The trials are complete, and the bonding has exceeded all expectations. The Valorian Empire formally recognizes humanity as a worthy partner in galactic civilization. But Marcus barely heard the formal proclamation. He was looking at Zarathul, and through their bond he could feel her thoughts echoing his own. They had started this ceremony as representatives of their respective species, but they were ending it as something entirely new. The first truly integrated partnership between human and Valorian consciousness. The diplomatic mission had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. But more importantly, they had proven that the vast distances between species could be bridged by courage, trust, and the willingness to risk everything for the possibility of genuine understanding. 3 months after the bonding ceremony, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Joint Human-Valorian Research Station, watching as ships from both species worked together to establish humanity's first permanent presence in Valorian space. The station, built around a stable wormhole junction, would serve as a diplomatic hub and cultural exchange center for years to come. The integration had proceeded far more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. The neural bond between Marcus and Zarathul had provided both species with unprecedented insights into each other's psychology, technology, and social structures. What had begun as a desperate diplomatic gamble had evolved into the foundation for a true alliance. "You're brooding again." Zarathul's mental voice reached him, tinged with gentle amusement. Through their bond, he could sense her approaching from the far side of the station, where she had been coordinating the installation of Valorian bioneural networks. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Marcus replied through their link. 3 months ago I was just a ship captain, hoping to avoid an interstellar incident. Now I'm the co-administrator of humanity's most important diplomatic facility. Zarathul joined him at the viewport, her massive frame moving with the fluid grace that still amazed him. Over the past months, she had adapted to their bond with remarkable speed, learning to moderate her strength even further to accommodate her enhanced awareness of human fragility. In return, Marcus had developed a tactical awareness and physical coordination that drew on her combat experience. "The station is only the beginning," she said, both aloud and through their mental connection. "The Council has approved the exchange program. Soon we will have human researchers working alongside Valorian scientists, and Valorian warriors training with human tactical specialists." Marcus nodded, watching as a human transport ship docked with graceful precision in a bay designed for vessels 10 times its size. The Valorian dock workers had learned to handle human equipment with delicate care, while human engineers had developed new techniques for interfacing with Valorian biotechnology. "Captain Chen," came a voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Dr. Rodriguez approaching, her expression mixing excitement with exhaustion. She had been working almost constantly since the bonding ceremony, studying the bioneural interface technology and its implications for both species. "Doctor," Marcus replied, "how are the integration studies progressing?" "Better than we ever hoped," she said, consulting her datapad. "The bioneural compatibility between humans and Valorians is remarkable. We've had 17 additional volunteer pairs undergo modified bonding ceremonies, and every single one has been successful. The psychological profiles show enhanced creativity, improved problem-solving abilities, and increased emotional resilience in both species." Zarathul's armor plates shifted to pleased gold. "The Council is particularly interested in the tactical applications. Bonded human-Valorian pairs have proven exceptionally effective in combat simulations, combining human adaptability with Valorian strength in ways neither species could achieve alone." Dr. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. "But the implications go far beyond military applications. We're seeing breakthroughs in art, philosophy, engineering, everywhere that the combination of human creativity and Valorian discipline creates synergistic effects." Marcus felt a warm pulse of satisfaction through his bond with Zarathul. They had proven that the differences between their species weren't obstacles to overcome, but advantages to be combined. The fear and mistrust that had initially characterized human-Valorian relations had gradually given way to genuine cooperation and mutual respect. "Any word from Earth about the expansion proposals?" Marcus asked. "The Colonial Council approved the plan yesterday," Dr. Rodriguez replied with a grin. "They're fast-tracking the construction of 6 more joint stations throughout Valorian space. And the Valorian Empire has agreed to provide protection for human exploration vessels venturing into the Galactic core region." Through their bond, Marcus felt Zarathul's deep satisfaction with this development. Her people had initially viewed humans as interesting but ultimately insignificant. Now they were being asked to serve as protectors and guides for human expansion into previously inaccessible regions of space. "Your species has a gift for changing perspectives," she said through their mental link. Before meeting humans, most Valorians believed that strength was the only quality worth respecting. Now we understand that courage, adaptability, and the willingness to risk everything for mutual understanding are equally valuable. Ambassador Rodriguez entered the observation lounge, carrying a formal diplomatic pouch that bore the seals of both Earth and the Valorian homeworld. "Marcus, Zarathul, I have official confirmation of your new assignments." Marcus accepted the documents, noting that they were written in both human script and Valorian bioluminescent text. As he read, he felt Zarathul's attention focusing through their bond. "By joint proclamation of the Earth Colonial Council and the Valorian High Command," he read aloud, "Captain Marcus Chen and Commander Zarathul are hereby appointed as the first ambassadors of interspecies unity, with authority to establish diplomatic relations with newly contacted alien civilizations on behalf of the Human-Valorian Alliance." Zarathul's armor plates cycled through, colors that indicated surprise and honor. "A joint diplomatic mission," she said wonderfully. "Your species and mine, working together to make contact with other civilizations." "There's more," Ambassador Rodriguez added with a smile. "Intelligence reports suggest there are at least 7 other spacefaring species in this galactic sector. Most of them have been avoiding contact with the Valorians because they fear our warrior culture, but a joint human-Valorian diplomatic team might be able to establish peaceful relations where single-species missions have failed." Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about the vast galaxy that lay waiting to be explored. Through his bond with Zarathul, he could sense her excitement at the prospect of discovery, balanced by a deep commitment to ensuring that future first contacts proceeded more smoothly than their own initial meeting. "Are you ready for a lifetime of impossible diplomatic challenges?" she asked through their mental link, her thoughts colored with affection and anticipation. "With you as my partner, I think we can handle anything the galaxy throws at us," Marcus replied. "After all, we've already proven that the most unlikely partnerships can create the strongest bonds." Dr. Rodriguez cleared her throat diplomatically. "There is one other matter. The bioneural research team has been studying the long-term effects of your bonding, and they've discovered something interesting. The neural integration appears to be continuing to evolve. You're not just sharing thoughts and emotions anymore. You're beginning to develop entirely new cognitive capabilities that neither species possesses individually." Marcus felt a thrill of excitement through the bond as Zarathul processed this information. They had already noticed subtle changes in their thinking patterns, moments when they seemed to arrive at solutions that neither could have reached alone. "What kind of capabilities?" Zarathul asked. "Enhanced pattern recognition, accelerated learning, intuitive understanding of complex systems," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "It's as if the bonding process created a hybrid consciousness that combines the best aspects of both human and Valorian cognition while developing entirely new features." Marcus looked at Zarathul, feeling their thoughts beginning to synchronize as they contemplated the implications. Through their bond, he experienced her perspective on the vast challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, while she gained access to his human intuition and creativity. "We're becoming something new," she said through their mental link. "Not human, not Valorian, but something that could serve as a bridge between species across the galaxy. The universe just got a lot more interesting," Marcus replied, smiling as he felt her mental laughter echo through their bond. 6 months later, as their ship approached the home system of the enigmatic Cytherian collective, Marcus and Zarathul stood side by side on the bridge of their specially designed vessel. The ship itself was a marvel of human Valorian engineering. combining the elegant functionality of human design with the biotechnological sophistication of Valorian construction. Through their neural bond, they shared the excitement of impending discovery and the responsibility of representing not just their own species, but the possibility of peaceful cooperation among all sentient